Welcome to the latest installment of Don't Take This as Gospel. I'm Mike Partika, and we're in the middle of a three-part look at Mormonism. Now, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is an offshoot of Christianity that was created in America by Joseph Smith Jr. Joseph Smith Jr. lived in the 1820s, and he believed that the multiplicity of Christian denominations was a plague, and he could not figure out which among these denominations represented the true Christian faith. So at some point, he claims he had a vision of God, who is called Heavenly Father in Mormonism. And this vision was of God and Jesus telling him that the true Christian faith had been lost, and wouldn't you know it, the true church needed to be restored by you, Joseph Smith Jr., and consequently, he created himself a little cult following, and he moved with his cult to Nauvoo, Illinois, where he introduced polygamy into Mormonism. That was something that had long been extinct from Christianity. And partly because of that, partly because of political machinations, he was eventually shot to death by a mob that was possibly led by his political rivals. So that's a quick history of Mormonism. Mormonism was inherited by his disciple Brigham Young, who expanded on the polygamy, and they eventually moved to Utah, and that's where the main LDS temple is today. And they exist down to the present day with a series of prophets descending from, not literally genetically descending from, but appointed prophets descending from Joseph Smith Jr. and Brigham Young. So, if we want to look at the Mormon books of scriptures, we would find that two of their scriptures they share with Christianity, and it's the Old Testament and the New Testament. And then the scriptures exclusive to Mormonism are the Book of Mormon, Doctrines and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Now, we're going to be focusing on Doctrines and Covenants today because I want to show you a pretty severe conflict between the Gospel of John and Doctrines and Covenants. Now, let's take a look at the end of the Gospel according to John. These are some mysterious words of Jesus concerning the fate of the Apostle John, and it starts like this. Jesus said to Peter, "When you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." This Jesus spoke, signifying by what death Peter would glorify God. And when Jesus had spoken this, he said to Peter, "Follow me." Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following. Now that's the Apostle John, according to tradition. Peter, seeing John, said to Jesus, "But Lord, what about this man, John?" Jesus said to him, "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Now, what does Jesus mean here by saying, "if you remain until I come"? It means that Jesus will be going away, and then at the end of history, he will come back. And we have no idea how long it's going to be until he comes back. So, what Jesus is effectively saying is, if I will that John remain alive until the end of history, what is that to you? You follow me. All right, so then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple, meaning John, would not die. Yet, Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but, "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you?" This is the disciple who testifies of these things, and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. So here you have Jesus saying this very kind of cryptic thing about the Apostle John, but it's basically saying, hey, if this guy were to stay alive until the end of time, what is that to you? So let's take a look at the story so far. All right, Peter has just learned that he would die for Jesus. All right, so, finding out about your own death, that's kind of a freaky thing. And when he sees John following along, he asks, okay, well, what's going to happen to him? And Jesus essentially says, well, what about him? If he were to live until the second coming, that wouldn't be your concern. We're supposed to be focused on ourselves and on our own fate. We're not supposed to be comparing ourselves against one another. You've got your fate, I've got my fate, he's got his fate, she's got her fate. You don't worry about anybody but yourself, okay? Now, the saying that Jesus gave here, saying if he were to live until the second coming, that would not be your concern. That started a rumor in the Christian community saying that John would, in fact, live until the second coming. But John instead cautioned, look, Jesus only said if. He didn't say that I would. Because going back up here, he says, Jesus did not say to him, to John, that he would not die, but only asked the question, if. So John says, Jesus only said if, he didn't say I would. So here's the important part. The Apostle John, knowing that this rumor was going around about him, that he was now going to live forever, essentially, John left the door open to that. He left the door open to the possibility that he might live forever, and he opened the door, and he also kept the door open to the possibility that it might not. So it's kind of like, are you living in the Highlander universe, or are you living in the Star Wars universe? So here are the two possibilities. John lives forever. He's like Highlander. Wow, check it out. Jesus really did make me immortal, except it's minus the swords and the cutting off heads thing. Or, spoiler alert, John eventually dies, kind of like this mysterious character who I won't name for fear of, hell, it's Yoda. Everybody's seen Return of the Jedi by now, right? Okay, so here you have an example of John eventually dying. And you have to admit, though, Jesus never actually said that he was immortal. So you've got these two possibilities open. And John, here's the important part. John doesn't know which of these two possibilities is the reality. For all he knows, Jesus did make him immortal with those words. Or, for all he knows, Jesus didn't do anything of the kind, and he's eventually going to die. It's really important that we look at this particular thing. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die. This is said emphatically, and it's backed up by saying, look, I'm the guy writing this stuff down, and I'm telling the truth. All right, so truly, I am telling you, Jesus did not tell me I would not die. All right, keep that in mind, because we're going to get really into some really interesting territory now. Oh, look, Jesus' words aren't so mysterious after all. Well, this is from the book Doctrines and Covenants, which is the second book of the Mormon Scriptures. And Doctrines and Covenants is a collection of sermons and other little chunks of knowledge or doctrine that Joseph Smith Jr. Delivered to his followers at one time or another. It's not written in chronological order, so you kind of have to go back and forth and sort around. But the portion that we're looking at today is from Doctrines and Covenants, chapter 7, and verses 1 through 4. So check this out. And the Lord said unto me, John, my beloved, what desirest thou? For if you shall ask what you will, it shall be granted unto you. And I said unto him, Lord, give unto me power over death, that I may live, and bring souls unto thee. And the Lord said unto me, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, because thou desirest this, thou shalt tarry until I come in my glory, and shalt prophesy before nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. And for this cause the Lord said unto Peter, If I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? So this links this very clearly back to the story at the end of the Gospel of John, in John chapter 21. And what Joseph Smith Jr. is saying here is that Jesus told John directly, you will live until my second coming. Interesting, right? And just to make sure I'm not misinterpreting this, this is on the LDS website, and you can look up these scriptures for yourself. They have their scriptures online at www.lds.org. Just look for the link that says scriptures, and they'll pop up the books. But you've got section 7, and according to this is a revelation that was given to Joseph Smith based on a parchment made by John and hidden up by John. Now, Joseph Smith Jr. did not have the parchment himself. It was just revealed to him that there existed this parchment, and he was able to read it and determine that this is what it said, this section that I show you above. And it says here, 1 to 3, John the Beloved will live until the Lord comes. So this is an official teaching of the LDS Church, that the Apostle John is immortal, that he is walking the world today. Now, let's do a comparison between the two sections. First, we've got from the Bible, Jesus' words were merely a hyperbolic response to Peter's inquiry about John. I mean, Jesus was basically going overboard and saying, hey, if he were to live until the end of the world, what would that be to you? What's your concern with that? That's his fate. You worry about your fate. You follow me. That's all you need to care about. Likewise, Jesus didn't say that John was immortal, only what if he were? And last, John deliberately left open the possibility that he might die because he honestly didn't know whether he would die or not. So that's what's clear from the Bible. But over in Doctrines and Covenants, we find that, first, Jesus' words were a direct answer to John's earnest plea for immortality. Next, Jesus explicitly said he had made John immortal. And finally, John, knowing that he'd been made immortal, denied that Jesus ever said so in his gospel. Because over here, he literally said, Jesus didn't say that I was going to live forever. And yet, in Doctrines and Covenants, section 7, Jesus explicitly says he's been made immortal. And John, knowing this, denied it and refused to confirm the rumor that Christians were spreading. And you could say, that, hey, I don't want my brethren to know that I'm immortal because, for all I know, they're going to test it by throwing rocks at me or shooting arrows at me and, trying to kill me in various ways just to try and prove it. But at the same time, he concealed that knowledge. He had that knowledge, and he concealed that knowledge. Now, we have to come to the conclusion that one of these books is lying. Because the New Testament tells us Jesus didn't say John would live forever, only that he asked Peter, so what if John lives forever? Doctrines and Covenants, on the other hand, tells us Jesus did say John would live forever, in no uncertain terms. Now, if Doctrines and Covenants is true, then John deliberately lied to the disciples of his day, instead writing the truth on a separate parchment that would never be found, only remotely viewed, apparently, by Joseph Smith Jr. nearly 1,800 years later. And adding insult to equivocation, John ends his description of Jesus' words in his gospel by affirming the absolute truth of his testimony, even while lying to his audience. You'll recall, this is the disciple who testifies of these things, and we know that his testimony is true. You can believe me, even though this statement right here, according to Doctrines and Covenants, was an outright lie. So eventually, it all comes down to who are you going to trust? Are you going to trust the Apostle John and the New Testament? Or are you going to trust Joseph Smith Jr. and Doctrines and Covenants? If you trust the New Testament, you have to call Joseph Smith Jr. a liar, which would make you more of a Christian rather than a Mormon. But if you call Joseph Smith Jr. the truth teller in this case, you have to call the Apostle John a liar, which would make you a Mormon, and it would probably make you a very confused Mormon if you were to really think about this in any amount of detail, because you're basically saying that an apostle was a liar. Well, your mileage may vary, and I'm not going to tell you which one to go with because that's going to be on you. But you do have a decision to make about who is it that was honest? Was it the Apostle John, or was it Joseph Smith Jr.? All right, so thank you for listening to this episode of Don't Take This as Gospel. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've got one more item to cover in Mormonism, and then we'll be moving on to other topics. But do subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video comes in, and I will talk to you later.